Leadership race hots up as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak vow to toughen controls on migration into the UK. The former Chancellor said he would tighten the definition of who qualifies for asylum and introduce a cap on refugee numbers. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said she would extend the UK's Rwanda asylum plan and increase the number of Border Force staff. During the week, Rishi Sunak said he'd put the UK on a crisis footing if he were to become Prime Minister. And Truss said that if she were to become Prime Minister, she would scrap or replace EU laws which hinder growth by the end of 2023. So, Paul, I'm sure as ever you're rubbing your hands together in glee that this leadership race is going on. But what have you made of some of the comments this week?
I think it's a little bit fractious still, isn't it? And I think that doesn't really go down well with the public. They don't like the personality clashes. They don't like the petty personal squabbling. They want politicians to concentrate on the issues. And I think, to be fair to the candidates, they are starting to do that a little bit more. I think in the early stages, it was all there was a lot of bloodletting, wasn't it? You know, it was very kind of personalised. They're getting into this debate, Deanna, about tax cuts, but I think they're missing the real problem of potentially a looming recession. Instead of arguing on the territory of whether it's right to cut tax and how much we should cut tax by, and don't get me wrong, I'm in favour of targeted tax cuts for some of the poorest people in society, particularly those people who are more likely to spend straight away and therefore keep the economy going, hopefully. But the real question for me, how do you get real wages rising at the moment? It's not just about the narrow ground of tax cuts, it's about getting money into people's pockets, because if you don't do that, then you do risk the economy going under. You do risk us getting into a recession. So, you know, get real wages rising, increase the minimum wage. I would like to see both the candidates make that sort of commitment. Much better public sector pay deals. I don't think the ones that were imposed over the last few days were anything like good enough. So it's almost to me as if the main point is being missed. And, you know, the biggest issue facing this country at the moment economically is that potential recession. And I don't think either candidate has yet really addressed that point.
I just want to bounce back your point about the minimum wage. There's always a bit of a concern from business, though, isn't there, that when that minimum wage goes up, it is harder for businesses to balance the books if you're paying a higher figure for the same kind of input from your staff. And I certainly saw it when I used to work in hospitality. Whenever the minimum wage went up, if it was a really tough time, and hospitality, as we know, has had a really difficult few years, the only way they could balance it was by cutting people's hours, which surely doesn't really have the right effect, does it, for some of those lowest paid workers?
I think that, I mean, I remember, you know, when the Labour government came in 1997, and obviously in their manifesto was the commitment for a minimum wage. I remember at the time business and, dare I say, Tory politicians making those very arguments, saying, look, if you introduce a minimum wage at all, what you're going to do is you're going to increase the cost for business, you're going to cut their profit margins, because you're increasing their overhead, you're going to need to lay people off. And as a result of that, what we're going to see is high unemployment as a result of a minimum wage. And actually, we didn't see that at all. What we saw is minimum wage was introduced. Millions of workers were taken out of poverty pay, and actually that gave a boost to the economy because it put money in people's pockets. People were more likely to spend that money. As a result of that, businesses were taking in more. The government was taking more in terms of tax revenue. I mean, look, I know that there sometimes comes a point where you do need to worry about costs on business. Of course, I don't want us to be uncompetitive, but I think there is real scope at the moment for increasing the minimum wage. And particularly when you look, as I said, at that overarching problem of a sluggish economy, an economy that could tip into recession if we're not careful. We get into that downward spiral of job losses and businesses going out of business. That would be much, much worse than any, you know, marginally increased cost on business in terms of a minimum wage, in my view.